A bloodline in shambles and a midnight bargain with fate. Mike Flanagan's newest Netflix series is pure Poe. But what does it all mean? Will be the telltale heart? Here's the twisted ending of The Fall of the House of Usher explained. Spoilers ahead. The Fall of the House of Usher splits its story across 3 timelines. The main narrative sees Roderick Usher provide his confession to his longtime investor, Auguste Dupin, while they sit in the dilapidated Usher home. Roderick recalls the recent events that have claimed the lives of his children in mysterious fashion, which make up the second timeline, while he also explains how his past actions have led to their fates. Unsettling visions plague Roderick as he tells a harrowing story. Interspersed between this conversation is a walk down memory lane to witness Roderick's and his twin sister Madeline's rise to power. We follow them from their humble beginnings and the tragic passing of their mother, Eliza, to their burning ambition to take over the pharmaceutical industry through their Fortunato company and the miracle painkiller known as Ligadone. A younger Dupin also features here, as he tries to convince Roderick to do the right thing and turn in the Fortunato CEO Rufus Griswold for his shady dealings. Across all timelines, one common denominator remains: a mysterious woman known as Verna, who appears to have the supernatural power to shapeshift and deliver wicked justice on the spoiled Usher children. However, the relationship between her, Roderick, and Madeline isn't made clear until the final episode, when all is revealed about how their paths crossed. The title fall occurs in the series' 8th and final episode. Roderick Usher reveals to Augustine Dupin that he and his sister Madeline buried Fortunato CEO Rufus Griswold behind a wall. That evening, they headed to a bar to build an alibi. There, they met the bartender, Verna, who presented them with a Faustian deal. They will never suffer legal consequences for the rest of their lives and can use Fortunato for whatever they want, altruism or enrichment. But there's a catch, of course.
Just before you would have died, Roderick. Just before you would have died. Anyway, your bloodline dies with you.
They accepted the deal, hence the deaths of Roderick's children. What breaks Roderick, though, is the passing of his granddaughter, Lenore, whom he regards as the best of everyone. That finally wakes him up to the gravity of their bargain. However, Verna recognizes the child's virtue and makes it painless, and she tells Lenore how her death will end up being the catalyst for millions of lives being saved in the future. Back at the Usher house, Roderick confesses to Dupin that he was always aware that greed and ambition would consume his family.
I knew I would climb to the top of the tower on a pile of corpses.
He also reveals that he poisoned and killed Madeline, leaving her in the basement. However, she isn't dead, rising and strangling Roderick to death, as Dupin rushes out and watches the House of Usher collapse. About as subtle as a tumbling building, The Fall of the House of Usher doesn't play around with its message or theme. The title signifies both the end of the bloodline and the family's legacy. While Roderick and Madeline Usher are obsessed with taking over Fortunato and using it to build an unstoppable empire, it all comes to naught. But from their ashes, hope rises. The last remaining long-blood-related Ushers are Juno, Roderick's second wife, and Morel, Frederick's wife and Lenore's mother. They decide to use their inheritance for good rather than repeat the cycle of pain. Juno inherits Roderick's fortune, but she dismantles Fortunato and starts the Phoenix Foundation to help treat addiction, while Verna reveals that Morel eventually recovers from her horrific injuries and inherits a sizable amount of money. Morel gives most of it away, but she uses the rest to set up the non-profit Lenore Foundation in honor of her daughter, which saves millions of lives around the world. The flashback sequences showcase Roderick Usher with his first wife, Annabelle Lee, and his eldest children, Tamerlane and Frederick. While the family isn't living in the lap of luxury or experiencing the lifestyle of the rich and famous, there are fleeting moments that indicate a pure happiness that is never reached again. The love between Roderick and Annabelle comes across as genuine, and judging by Roderick's poetic remembrance of her, is something he never finds again.
And we loved with a love that was more than a love. I and my Annabelle.
Roderick's obsession with power and money blinds him to what's important in life. Even when his children pass, he doesn't appear to be too devastated by their deaths, since money has already created a wedge between them all. They fail to appreciate each other, only focusing on what they can gain for selfish purposes. It's only when Roderick loses his granddaughter, who never asked for anything from him, that he realizes all the money in the world means nothing in the end. After the death of the Ushers, Auguste Dupin summarizes the situation perfectly. He explains that he is set to go home and spend time with his family, which makes him the richest man in the world. Meanwhile, Roderick dies without his fortune or affection from his family. In essence, he perishes as the poorest man on earth. The Fall of the House of Usher not so subtly addresses the opioid crisis and the controversial role of pharmaceutical companies valuing profits over health. While the young Roderick Usher believes in the power of ligodone as a non-addictive painkiller, he realizes this is a fallacy, and there was never an earnest intention to help others, only to make money by any means necessary. In the final episode, Werner forces Roderick to come to terms with his actions at the Fortunato offices as he witnesses hordes of bodies dropping from the high-rise building to the ground. She reminds him that these are all the deaths that the Ushers and Fortunato have caused over the decades while building their empire on the suffering and pain of others. On another level, both Madeline and Roderick are solely responsible for the deaths of their family. They doom their bloodline through their bargain with Werner, not once stopping to think of the long-term implications for short-term returns. For them, their ambition and immediate desires trump consequence or the ability to let others choose their own destinies. They ultimately become Grim Reapers, as they sentence their family members to death through their acts of selfishness and self-indulgence. The extent of Werner's powers remain unclear in the Fall of the House of Usher, though there's no denying that she can see into the past, present, and future of every individual. In the 7th episode, drawing Frederick Usher's death, Werner reveals to him that an alternate future existed if Roderick and Madeline hadn't accepted her offer. Their decision changed his life forever.
A dentist. That's the funniest part. That's what you were going to be in the other life.
It all but indicates that events would have turned out differently for everyone had the Usher twins chosen differently on that fateful night. Roderick and Madeline are aware of this too, believing the end of their bloodline is a fair price to pay for ensuring their family never struggles in life. They would rather risk it all and embrace corruption than live with the anxiety of being ordinary and struggling to achieve anything. However, there's yet another possible branch here. Even if the Ushers had taken Werner's offer, they could have still used the opportunity to turn Fortunato into a force for good. She leaves the choice in their hands.
We're sitting outside of time and space. This is the moment.
While it's unlikely the outcome would have been different, since a deal is a deal here, the Ushers might have left a better mark on the world through their actions and become revered for it rather than reviled. In Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher, the closeness of the relationship between Roderick and Madeline Usher has long been disputed. One school of thought suggests that they may share a strong psychic bond often found in stories about twins. However, a conflicting view presumes that they may have been lovers. The show also illustrates an extreme closeness between the siblings, as Madeline and Roderick appear to be glued at the hip in their early years while growing apart later on in their lives. However, any indication of them being lovers is quickly dispelled when Madeline reveals that she is attracted to women and has no interest in men. Plus, the two never engage in any kind of behavior to suggest otherwise. With regards to the Usher twins, Mike Flanagan and his team don't link too much into them having any type of psychic link. Instead, he uses their mutual shared desire for power and ambition as the main driver for what brings and keeps them close. They believe Fortunato and its riches are their birthright, and that they should become the king and queen of the company.
Cheers to you, Cleopatra.
The short story The Fall of the House of Usher doesn't feature a lot of protagonists and antagonists. In fact, the three main characters are Roderick Usher, his sister Madeline, and the unnamed narrator of the story. While the Netflix show utilizes certain elements from this premise, it also puts its own spin on matters by introducing a wealth of characters and themes from other Edgar Allan Poe tales. For example, Auguste Dupin is based on C. Auguste Dupin, a detective from a few other Poe stories. On the show, Dupin steps into the narrator's spot, becoming the person whom Roderick spills the beans to. Similarly, the names of the characters take inspiration from figures introduced in Poe's poems and stories. Lenore, Annabel Lee, and even the name of their company, Fortunato, are just a few examples among many. Arguably, the biggest addition to the show is Werner, but even that's a sly Poe wink. The name is an anagram for Raven. To this day, the Raven, of course, remains one of Poe's most memorable works.
My mom used to tell us that ravens were the minions of Satan because Noah
Threw them overboard and they still survived the flood.
Much like Mike Flanagan's other projects, The Fall of the House of Usher ends on a conclusive note and doesn't tease a second season. This story provides a definitive beginning, middle, and end, putting the Usher family 6 feet under by the time the credits roll. And to know there isn't a hand that pops out of the grave to signify someone will be back as a zombie. Auguste Dupin's narration at the end of the final episode also provides answers to any questions the audience may have about the fate of the remaining characters. In addition, he reveals how the Ushers' lawyer Arthur Pym serves a lifetime jail sentence and accepts it without any fight, as he takes the fall for Fortunato's controversial practices. Dupin also discloses how his case is now shut and over. For most of his adult life, he was consumed with taking down the Ushers, but now with them being dead, he can finally rest. Since Mike Flanagan approached the fall of the House of Usher as a wider tribute to Edgar Allan Poe's body of work, rather than a straightforward adaptation of the Master of Macabre original short story, the possibilities for various spin-offs exist. First off, the most natural character to transition to other stories is Werner. Since Werner is a shapeshifter, this means any potential further installments in Flanagan's Poe universe could continue with or without actress Carla Gugino's involvement. However, after her phenomenal performance on the show, not to mention her multiple collaborations with Flanagan, it's likely most fans would want to see her return. A second character that merits further exploration is Arthur Pym. In this story, Pym remains loyal to the Ushers and acts as their lead attorney as well as their fixer.
Objection.
Sustained.
Their lead attorney.
Pym doesn't feature in the Fall of the House of Usher short story, but he is from Poe's 1838 novel, the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket. Elements of this tale feature in the retelling of Pym's enigmatic backstory, and his eyebrow-raising journey, filled with all sorts of horror and tribulation, could be turned into its own terrifying mini-series. Whether or not any of that happens is anyone's guess, but fans of both Poe's and Flanagan's work can still enjoy the Fall of the House of Usher as a satisfying standalone tale.
To the House of Usher, whose time has come.